Welcome to the very first event hosted by Crea Show. Today we are talking about the climate crisis and collective action. Crea Show is a new community that functions online and offline, and we are looking towards research and education in the field of harmonious coexistence with people and planet. This is very broad, and I won't go too deep into it right now. We do have a podcast as well where we go more into details as to what we do as a show. So we invite you to also look into that. I have a fantastic panel with me today. Three people: Lies Huytema, Jan van der Ploeg, and Shadnik Agaki. And they have different uh, perspectives in terms of the climate crisis, and they are doing different things in terms of tackling this crisis. I love to share these different perspectives with you. I will let everyone introduce themselves. So, Liz, could you tell us who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I will introduce myself. Thank you. My name is Lies Huytema, and I'm a teacher at Van Hal University of Applied Sciences in the Netherlands, based in Velp. And I have a background in environment society studies. Actually, I graduated on the topic of urban climate adaptation and continued to work as a teacher, actually mostly concerned with sustainability and being engaged in all kind of climate activism practices. Actually, I was raised in a home with my parents also being involved in activism already. So yeah, that's something that is really close to my heart and something I work on with students. And we talk about a lot in the lectures. So yeah, that's also my role for today, to talk with you about my perspective, not only as a teacher, but also as a citizen and being concerned with climate change and like to act on it. So yeah, that's me.
Shadrach.
Thank you, Radhika. Yeah, as you've heard, my name is Shadrach Agaki. I'm a climate change and food system communication expert. I work as a researcher for a member of parliament in the Parliament of Kenya. I think I have big interest in climate change because I realized climate change is one of the greatest threat to sustainable food security. So I've been working on this space for the last, I think, 10 years. So I'm happy and glad to share my insights here from Nairobi and what we need to do, most importantly, to activate collective action on climate change.
Thank you very much, Shadrach. And Jan?
Yeah, hello, good afternoon. My name is Jan van der Ploeg. I'm a lector, which is some sort of a professor at the Van Hal University of Applied Sciences in Velp. I started not so long ago, a couple of months ago, and before that I have worked in the Dutch Caribbean, on the island of Bonaire, and in different other places around the world on the, front line of climate change. I spent 3 years in the Solomon Islands, working in the Pacific with fishermen and food security. I think that's something really interesting for Shadrach, and maybe we should share some thoughts about that. And before that, I worked in Indonesia, in the Philippines, and I'm very glad to participate here and listen to you and see what we can learn from each other.
Thank you for joining. So yeah, I have a couple of questions. Yes, this is like more exploratory in terms of what is climate crisis and what is collective action from these different points of views, and yeah, how can the people listening to this take lessons and maybe put it into their own community. So I will start by asking, how would you explain climate change to someone? whoever feels like they want to answer.
I think that's a nice question for you, Lies.
To start on this, how I would explain climate change to someone. Yeah, of course it all starts as being explained as a natural effect. We always had climate change in different periods of time, but now we have this caused by human activities climate change, which really endangers our planet severely and affects our lives in different places. Actually, what I'm shocked about are the facts that already half of the world population had experienced severe impacts of climate change right now, and that 30% of all people worldwide will be displaced by climate change in 25 years, probably already. So the climate change that we're now experiencing is having a big impact on our lives, and also not only physical effects, and we already see a change in our environment, of course, but we also have a lot of social impact, social effects, which is already can be noticed by people migrating, of course, changing their habitats, and that's only getting worse in the future. So climate change, should be tackled like a crisis, because it's a crisis right now. So I would explain it like that. Yeah. If that answers your question. It's a bit pessimistic to start. Sorry.
Yes, I mean, no, that is your way of explaining the climate change. And is there any thoughts from Jan or Shadrach in terms of how?
I think I will go after your list. The definition of climate change is a really challenge. Sorry, when we are in Africa, and one of the challenge we are having is that the awareness of climate change is so low. People don't understand what is climate change. Of course, we know if you were to explain simply what is climate change, you talk about the variability of weather. We have more floods and frequent floods than we used to have. Now, if you are trying to explain to people, and people then will ask you, but we have been having floods all the time. What has happened now is, the increase of the frequency of these events. And like Les was saying, this impact is occasioned by, weather variability and the activities of human beings. They are called anthropogenic activities. That is what is causing, the variability in terms of weather. So that is the way I explain this to a person level. But most importantly, what I've realized is that we don't even need to explain what is climate change. We need to explain to our people what are the impacts of this climate change. If we are able to explain the impacts, then somebody will be able to see what is the cause of it and what are the remedies. What is it that they are going to do? Because sometimes when we tell people that, oh, this is climate change and climate change is causing it. So until the people internalize what the impact of the event is, then we'll have little action. I think as climate advocates, I will not say climate activists, because the connotation of activist, if you came to Kenya and you are saying, oh, you are an activist, sometimes people look at you and say, no, this is a person who wants free things. But if you are an advocate, like I say I am, then your role will be to explain to people. And this is what I've realized as the most effective way to explain and define climate change, is to define this in terms of the impacts they are having. Back to you.
So, as we're now talking about the impact of things, I wonder from Jan, what are the impacts that you see from your field in terms of climate change?
Yeah, well, we are teachers, at least Lisa and I are teachers, so we have to explain the impacts of climate change and effects of climate change on people and the planet as a whole. I do think that there is a lot of awareness of people about the mechanics of climate change, the emission of greenhouse gases, and there's a lot of attention, particularly in Europe, but also in a lot of other places, about the impacts of climate change. What is sometimes more difficult, and I think that is a challenge that I've been faced in my own work, is to highlight what is not climate change. And right now, I see a tendency to attribute a lot of phenomena, a lot of things that are happening to climate change. And I think that is a danger because it kind of underestimates the real impacts of climate change. And the moment that you say something about it, you are being dismissed as a climate denier. I come across this very often in my own work in the Dutch Caribbean, but also in the Pacific, that people highlight the impacts of climate change, whereas if you look at it in a much more analytical point of view, then you see that these are very different problems. These are issues of governance, issues of poverty, issues of law enforcement that are in general advocacy, but also in science, kind of lumped together and labeled as climate change. And I do think that we have to be very, very careful about this kind of lumping, about this tunnel vision that climate change currently is taking on. Climate change dominates the whole agenda, and that is not by per se a very good thing. And I'm not trying to dismiss climate activism at all. I think it plays a very important role. I certainly don't want to deny or place critical remarks at climate science, but I do think that there are a lot of different other bigger problems going on that are facing people at the local level than just only climate change. And I think maybe Shadrach, you can say something about that, about the challenges that people face in Kenya related to food security that are clearly have a link with climate change, but that's not the only problem that we have to solve. And sometimes I am a little bit perplexed by almost the simplicity of the word climate change. Everything's climate change. And I do think that is, as scientists, as advocates, as practitioners, we have to be much clearer to communicate what is not climate change, what are other problems, and how we can solve these issues.
I don't know whether you want me to respond. I think let me just come in straight and tell you that's the same challenge that I have. That everything is being, right now. I was attending the Africa Climate Summit. I think it's 2 to 3 weeks ago, and the conversation there, you listen to it and you are like, oh my God, there's nothing that is going to happen. Otherwise, the superficial conversation about climate change and everything and anything going as climate change, I think is a challenge for those of us who are advocating for, climate change adaptation and mitigation. So what I can say is, when you talk about climate change, especially in Kenya, one of the challenges that comes in is we are facing so many other challenges, like food insecurity is a key issue in Kenya. In fact, it is what caused people to go to the street for several months until the national dialogue was initiated for people to discuss about the cost of living. So when you talk about climate change, it is so distant in people's mind, and that, I think, for me, impedes people acting towards climate change. Because if we are talking about variability, we are talking about adaptation, like Les was saying. We can't talk about adaptation of something that we don't understand. And then the activities and the actions that we're going to take, local actions that we're going to take to enhance the resiliency and adaptation, people don't understand it. I think because of the challenges that we are facing as a country, and this is, I'm talking this generally about most of the developing countries. The question of climate change, the droughts don't make a lot of sense because people are fighting for the survival of the day. How do they get food? So until this is, connected to adaptation activities, then I think it is going to take us a long time before we address the crisis.
How would be a better way for us to address it, and so that the people kind of understand the urgency, but that you don't misplace, like Jan said, the other issues that are making perhaps the situation worse. I'll explain. Jan and I were talking about a situation on my home island, Bonaire, where they took a picture of people in water. It was basically sewage water that came up because of heavy flood. And Jan made the point that, well, the actions being taken, like the corals, planting the corals and planting the mangroves, are not going to help these people because it's a issue of infrastructure. And then in my own way, I would see it as, okay, I get that it's not directly climate change causing these people's issues, but it's making it worse. So the more of these rains that are going to come, and if the infrastructure is not going to be fixed, then it's only going to be more often. So what are the ways that we can kind of reconcile the fact that it's different perspectives? So it is the infrastructure, but it is also the climate change that it is making the weather worse, and in the case of Bonaire, giving more often the floods that are accompanied floods, water. In the case of Greece, that maybe the drought is causing even more food security. How can we make people realize the complexity of the situation? Is
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point that you're raising, Manarak. And the problem with climate change is that it's so big, no? So I do think it's very important to break the problem down into very specific issues and talk about specific places like Nairobi or like Bonaire, like you raised, or like the Solomon Islands. And I can just give two examples to illustrate a little bit what I mean and what I'm trying to get across here. First of all, in the Solomon Islands, people there live in coastal areas, are subsistence farmers, so they are hard hit by climate change, rising sea levels, different seasons, extreme weather patterns. These really affect the subsistence livelihoods of people in the Solomon Islands, particularly the marginalized groups in society. So it's a huge problem, and it will become a much bigger problem in the coming years. However, if you look at the very specific problems that people face are, for example, declining fish stocks, which are mainly caused by overfishing, something that people can address themselves, and logging by large international corporations who plunder the forest of where those people depend on. So which is something that people cannot address, but the government has to address. And those two very specific threats, overfishing and extractive industries, are threatening the livelihoods of people, are making people poorer. Climate change is aggravating it. But if we start talking about climate change, then suddenly we don't talk anymore about illegal logging taking place. and about the plunder of resources. We suddenly don't talk about empowering people to managing their fish stocks anymore. And that is the danger, if you, particularly in a third world context, in the developing world context, that you suddenly don't talk anymore about the really difficult choices that we have to make as a society. So it's not about that climate change is not a problem. On the contrary, it's a huge problem, but there are other problems that we can effectively tackle. Another example from Bonaire, where climate change is a very big threat to coral reefs. That's my field of expertise, so I'm working there. On the long term, climate change will affect those reefs. How it will do so, we don't know. We know right now that uncontrolled land development, very rich Dutch people coming to the islands to build large villas on the coast, is a much bigger threat for those reefs. So we have to tackle that problem first before we can talk about climate change. And that is the danger of talking all the time about climate change. It is a strategic choice, which is very good. It generates a lot of activism and it motivates people, but we have to make sure that the real issues facing people on the ground level doesn't disappear.
Thank you. Yeah. So as we now brought in the topic of activism, I wanted to ask Lise, how do you see that in the world of activism, bringing in, these two topics?
Yeah, I think, well, it's really interesting to hear your perspective, Jan, because I think it could also work the other way around, that because climate change is a big topic and everybody knows about it, everybody gets it, what is meant with climate change, we look at the things that are causing climate change, and now we are suddenly talking about fast fashion, for example, or about our digital addictions, that we all have smartphones and all kind of data everywhere, and that we are consuming far too much, or consuming too much meat and dairy products. I think because we know that climate change is the big effect which disrupts our lives real soon, or already does, we are talking about what causes it, and we can talk really concrete about what is wrong with the things that we do in our lifestyle. And I think, for example, with for the fashion topic, people consume far too much clothes, and they are not aware what the impact is of the production. But because we get more information about it, what is the CO2 that's being emitted in a production process, we can also talk about the conditions for the people that work in those factories. We are also having documentaries showing what's all about, and it also raises attention for the other things that need to be done, like you also said, Jan, that there are many other things that are underneath the problem of climate change. So I see it more as something that triggers people to go after those causes, and makes them active and doing something about it. Because we need to break climate change in steps, like what can we do we can what are the actions that we can take also as citizens. And I think that collective action is the most important one, because of course personal action, everybody has to do something, but if we do it as a group, it will be a political topic. We talk about it, and that's now something we see in the Netherlands. There's a lot of attention to a group called Extinction Rebellion, and they are worried that there is too much governmental money going to the fossil industries, and also a lack of money going to sustainable innovations. And they are doing a lot of demonstrations on that topic right now. And because of that collective action, everybody is talking about it right now in all kinds of places, in the place where I work together with Jan, but also my neighbors, my family. So I see that people get active, something really shifts also in politics. But maybe I'm already rushing forward to next questions, Manuela.
It's okay.
I think I want to jump in and comment on what you have said. How I see this, with the conversation, and debate all over the world, what we need to do is to have these conversation shape policies. Having been in a political environment for the last 10 years, I can say something that I believe is true, formulated, would depend on the conversation that is happening.
I think you should say that again, because you're missing it.
Internet problems.
No, he is frozen. While we are waiting for Sharak, I can respond to you, Lies, and let me be very clear. I very much respect the activists that are currently blocking the roads in The Hague. I think they have raised a very important issue and have generated a lot of awareness. I also think that the fact that they are there gives out a very good signal and has motivated and inspired a lot of young people. So I definitely do not want to dismiss their action. The key question, of course, is will they succeed with their political campaign, and will they really change something in the system? And I'm not very positive about that. I see a very big backlash. In fact, a lot of people do not agree with it, blocking the roads. I do think that it is important also to have a transparent and open discussion about whether the demands of those rebels are valid and whether they can actually be met. I very much sympathize with those rebels, but I also think that their demands are impossible to meet. The government simply cannot dismiss all the fossil subsidies at once. So, and I think that there are a lot of other issues that should be tackled as well by the government, also here in the Netherlands. And just a very narrow focus on climate change sometimes may not be the best solution for a civil society group focused on environmental issues and making a better world. But I agree with you that the climate call as a unifying call, really resonates very well and motivates a lot of people. But the key question remains, how do we get the other 80% on board? 90% perhaps.
How do you mean get them on board? Of what? In the politics or?
In politics, but in a democracy, of course, the choices the choices are made in parliament, and I do think that there's a very, very small amount of parliamentarians that actually sympathize right now with the demands of Extinction Rebellion. So I do think it's important to look out of our own bubble and see what the rest of society is thinking, and we shouldn't lose that connection.
Yeah, I agree. But what I see as a really big danger in which we're stepping again as society is only thinking about the reasons why not to do it, why we cannot change the system, why we cannot do it differently. Although I think we need to mark all the advantages of changing our system and changing it for the good, and also see what kind of practical obstacles there are, and also being really transparent about that. I agree with you. The things that are still, we don't have legalization yet for it, or we need to change rules before we can change something in the system. But what I really what I notice with every person actually, that we have this really this system, this coping mechanism that we always want to tell ourselves why we cannot change, why we should not change, or not ourselves, maybe the other ones, maybe the other countries. And I think that that is our biggest challenge also in the century, to think about why we should change, actually, why we should do differently, also when other countries are not doing that yet, or we are maybe having more costs changing ourselves than we have the results. Because it's of course something that we share with this whole world, the planet, and we cannot divide it equally. And you do this, that's something we have conference about all years, and it doesn't work if we try to negotiate it about how it can be managed. So I think that we should turn it around and think about why it's good to change, and make it really practical in the obstacles that we have. But don't waste your time anymore on telling people why we cannot change. That's really something I feel around myself, also with students, that really holds everyone back, and that's not what we need right now.
Yeah, I fully agree.
Thank you. I see Shabra is back. We've
Sorry, I just I think there was a problem with my internet, and I went off. Sorry for that. I don't know whether I want to finish what I was saying. Please allow me to just make that comment. I was saying that if we are going to address climate change in a collective way, we will have to start from our policies. Our policies have to be formulated in a system way. Because of the scarce resources, this is what I'm saying, and this is what I'm trying to encourage people to do. Because of the resources that we have that are limited, we can design our policies in such a way that one policy that one project that we do addresses multiple challenges. For instance, my food system personally, and I did a food system course from Wageningen University, I think last year, and it gave me a really insight on how we can address these challenges. Like Jan was saying, we don't need to, climate change has become so common that everything is going to be associated with climate change. Yes, that can be possible, but what we need to do is to have our policies designed in a way that they can address the challenges alongside us. We are talking about water and irrigation. When we know El Nino is coming, which is being caused by the climate change, the adaptation measures that we are supposed to take is to, conserve water. The water that is conserved is then used in different sectors. We are going to have education, water in schools, water that is conserved from the excess rainfall that we're going to have. We're going to have this water in the Ministry of Health, in the hospitals, health facilities. This is going to help. So it means if we were to invest in conservation of water, we are going to, knowing that, there's variability, rain is going to come, flooding is going to come. So we need to prepare such that we tap this water, conserve this water, and then use this water in different other sectors. This way, then, we're going to, even the resources that we are going to put in water conservation, we can enhance this investment a bit. And then, because we know it is going to address other challenges. If we do this, then we are sure we are addressing climate change adaptation, because in Africa and in most developing countries, for real, we are not going to talk about mitigation. What is it that we are emitting is so little that what we need to do, we need to adapt. But as we are adapting, we need also to invest in, in activities and policies that are going to reduce the climate impact, climate change impact.
Yeah, I think that if I can sum up what we've talked about so far, this is a big, complex challenge. that obviously we cannot compress into the 1 hour that we have today. But that it has to be tackled in these different ways, and there should still be attention for issues that are pressing, like infrastructure, like loss of food for these countries in the south, and that there's actually, for me, I see a possibility because we're having all of these conversations, and we know how things can drastically change in the coming years, that we can take that opportunity to start adapting. Because I do agree with Shadrach on that. Also, when I look at Bonaire, I'm also talking already about adaptation and not mitigation, because we need to start adapting. We know, in this case of a Caribbean island, that seawater is going to rise. Even if it is in 100 years, why not start looking at our infrastructure adapted to that, so that our children and grandchildren don't have to worry about that or become one of the migrants, like Lise were saying earlier, due to climate change. And at this point, I want to open up the opportunity for our guests to also ask questions. Let's see.
Let me see. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I was a bit late. I was driving. Yeah, I like all this input, and something comes to my mind now is the position of Africa in this whole debate. And I was following a debate last, and United Nations, they were talking about climate mitigation, climate change, and in all this debate, Africa is even not mentioned. It's like we don't exist in the whole story. And when it comes to Africa, it's like, okay, how can we compensate poor countries and how can we help them in the mitigation of climate change? While I think personally that maybe the solution could come from Africa, from all this climate change story. It's an holistic problem, so we will need an holistic approach. I am Max Kofi. I live in the Netherlands, but I'm working a lot in Africa. We do a lot of research also with the Wageningen University, and my organization, Africa in Motion, is also looking for global solution to this issue. And I like what Liz and Jan was discussing right now concerning activism. What we miss at that level is that we are not, all activists together, we are not focusing on fighting for a systemic change. So climate change has become one thing itself, while climate change is the consequence of economy, the economic system that has been imposed on this world, the capitalism. So I think if all activist groups like Extinction Rebellion could focus on how to fight this systemic cause of the problem, we could get much further. Yesterday, there was a meeting in Abuja in Nigeria. Now they are talking on rebuilding refineries in Nigeria, in all Africa. So while Extinction Rebellion is fighting to stop it in the Netherlands, they are building it again in Africa. So how are we going to fix this issue? Okay, let me introduce my vision on it and how we can solve this problem. First, it's changing this trade system first. TNO from Eindhoven, they have done a research when we talk about climate energy transition, for example. They have done a research at European level. Only 14% of raw materials needed for the energy transition in Europe can be found in Europe itself, 14%. And where are the 86% coming from? Again, Africa. But they don't talk about that. The Dutch Prime Minister and the President of the European Union went to Tunisia a month ago, you all know that, telling the public that they are going there to negotiate on migration issues. But the truth is that they went there to negotiate on green water stuff. They want to take it from Tunisia to Europe. So a lot of raw materials for this energy transition will come from Africa. What's happening at this moment is that African people, African continent, are left behind when it comes to revenue redistribution. And African government have to beg for money to fight climate change. While without African raw materials, a lot of industrialized countries cannot get nowhere. Without our raw materials, without something very simple, without cocoa from Ghana and Nigeria, you can never eat chocolate. It will be very hard. Without coltan from Congo, we couldn't have this meeting. So that is something I'm working on. We call it the equal trade certification, to change this system and come to a new system where we share the revenue made at the end of the value chain. If we do that, we can get back the control on these raw materials in Africa and then have more influence on the world. At this moment, nobody listens to African. We don't have voice. It doesn't matter. You can be professor from a university, you can be a president for a country, nobody listens to African, while the whole world is depending on Africa. So we need to change this paradox and get more control on the economic system, and then come with other solution. Climate change, when we talk about energy transition, we could initiate it from Africa at very large scale. When we talk about producing energy, solar energy, where is the best place to produce that than in the desert of Sahara for the whole world? So there are a lot of solutions. Only the problem at this moment is that Africa is left behind, and it will be very good to get in that direction when we discuss about this kind of issue. Africa can bring a solution if Africans themselves, but also activists from the whole world, come together and fight for systemic change. I don't believe we can reach something without systematically changing the system. So that's my point of view. It's a bit broad, but I was trying to keep it short. It's difficult, but that is what I wanted to say. Sorry that I've been long about it, but I was a bit late, so I couldn't follow it all.
Rika, I think I need to say something to Kofi.
Yes.
Kofi, in the just ended climate summit.
Yeah.
I like what President Ruto said.
Yeah.
He said that we need to have the correct value of Africa resources.
Yes.
Put on the balance sheet of the world. So that when we are being told we are developing countries, yet, just like you said, all the resources come from here.
Yeah.
We are, the world need to, like now, I need to appreciate, what is happening from the Netherlands. The Dutch, I think Dutch organizations are doing a lot of work in terms of getting the correct value of Africa resources being gotten. Like now we talk about coffee. They are trying to put in place measures to ensure that the correct value of coffee is gotten by the people from, or is a gain to the African people.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when I imagine what you are saying, then we start asking ourselves as Africans, what is it that we are going to do?
Yeah.
And what we need to do right now is to consolidate our voices. I can tell you, if there is a lot of noise about an issue globally,
yeah,
then the global, at the global stage, people are going to do something about it.
Exactly.
That's why I say whatever the conversation that is happening is not in vain, because we have started a process. But me and you who are seated here need to do more, because we need to enlighten people more of what is required. Sometimes we assume that the people in developed countries know what is the value of our materials. They might not. So it is upon us, upon our governments, to consolidate their voices and speak.
Yes.
I'm happy now that Africa is going to be in the G20. We need to push our leaders to articulate our issues in those platforms properly, such that we can get now the correct value of our resources.
Yeah.
That way, we can achieve more. But then I also want to add more, something more on top of what we've said. What are we doing with the resources that we have? I mean, the little that we have, are we putting it in proper use? That's why I was saying, are we thinking in a system way such that we are getting optimum value of what we have? I think we are not. I want to be honest. We are not. So it is also upon us as advocates and activists to put these things on the table, such that people who are in leadership positions get to understand these things. And once they understand them, let us make these issues public issues in our own countries, such that now people will take it from there to put in place policies that are effective to address the challenges.
And that's exactly the role of civil society organizations to put the pressure in a more organized way. So what we are trying to do is to create coalitions. I've been also talking with people from Extension Rebellion, but also people for Farmer Defense Group, and telling them, this is okay, you can block highways, fine, but that won't be a solution. The solution is to address the problem at its roots and collaborate globally. We are used to think in competition, like we are Africa, that is Europe, that is China. And that's something we should really, really, as human beings, try to stop thinking like that. It's very, very destructive to have, and it is all that where I started. It's all stimulated by this concept of capitalism. Like you have to fight very hard to make profit. It doesn't matter how you are going to make profit. So we are trying to create this coalition. And like you said, if we can put this issue at global stage, we can change a lot about it. And me personally, I was in a roundtable at the University of Wageningen 3 or 4 days ago. I told them I don't count anymore on African leaders. These people are leading us to nowhere. They don't have any idea about what is Africa. So it's up to us to create a new kind of generation of leaders for Africa, thinking globally. We are one. I never think this is Netherlands, this is Congo, this is Ghana. We are in one herd. There is no other ways than get together and think. This is what we call the Ubuntu philosophy, but people don't get it really. So we need to consider the world as one, and we the people, we should unite for all these issues. And so I agree with what you're saying. And there is a really need for creation of coalition and come together and put this issue on table. It's very, very important. So I'm open for collaboration, for that you know that, and just let's get together, and then I believe we can change this, but it will, it asks a lot of commitment.
Yes. Thank you, Max.
Yeah.
So I thought, Reese, did you want to say something? Unmuted.
Well, I am laughing about your last comment about the leaders, and I do think it's important to put things in perspective. No, we have a Dutch leader, Wopke Hoekstra, who was just nominated to lead one of the most crucial negotiations on global climate change, the next COP. There's a lot of fuss about it, and it's definitely not only the African leaders who are failing their people. I do think that problem is a little bit bigger than just Africa. And I like always this very famous speech by Greta Thunberg during one of the last climate change negotiations, in which she called upon leaders to act, and she said blah 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 blah. I think that's the best speech ever that somebody gave. You know, it's so obvious, and it's so clear that these are political games that are being played on a topic that is so important for the world. It's not very surprising that a lot of young people are losing trust in government, and that is an issue not only in Africa but definitely also in Europe. And I do think that, well, that's what I like about this collective action point. It shows that the answers most likely will not come from our leaders, and we have to look for very different solutions. But maybe, Lies, you can say something about it.
I love that speech from Greta, that you referred to. That is really what's all about. What I wanted to refer to what Kofi said is that the mindset of being a global citizen, that's of course something we're very new at. We have to learn ourselves what it means to be a global citizen, instead of being just a citizen in your own neighborhood and doing good for your local environment. And it's something that starts in schools, I think, with education, about making students aware of how systems are linked to each other, how we're dependent on other countries, because that is something that I missed in my school, although I'm not that old yet. It's something that we didn't learn about, how much we need each other. But I think also something that you should not say too much to people, that it's so difficult and such a wicked problem, and it's something, of course, that is the responsibility and to be aware of for political leaders. But we also know from climate psychology that if we think we're helpless as citizens, we just paralyze, we just freeze as human beings. And that is something I really want to prevent with especially young people, because they know that we have to change the system. And I think that it should be in every campaign that it's about the system and things are linked to each other. And I see it also in a group like the Extinction Rebellion, and they are organizing themselves with campaigns that are about racism and sexism. So they are seeing those links. But for just citizens, you also should keep it really simple and give them something to work on, I think. And those are really small steps. And also I'm thinking about how I can teach my students about that global citizenship, because that's really much important, for this area.
Thank you very much, Lise, and everybody that joined today. We have just 3 more minutes left, so I'll round it off here. I think this is a very important conversation that has to keep going on, and as I said, we can't go back to the complexity of what put it out. That is something that we as Creation want to continue this conversation by organizing more webinars and live events. I see a comment from Mehrab nice to hear you all. I have one question to Jan. I do agree that activists are using the same vibe as scaring people, like medieval era when priests scared people. Um, even motivated thousands of people to go to Jerusalem, but what was the output? So, what is the question? The same here. How would tactic of scaring people affect?
Well, I definitely will not claim that I have the answer. And again, I do think that the climate activists have achieved a lot by pinpointing a really big problem ahead of it. But I agree that we have to be careful with creating doom scenarios and we have to avoid that people kind of, as Lee says, lose hope or just as a way of a coping mechanism, just close their eyes and continue with business as usual. I do think that we can achieve a lot by taking incremental small steps instead of making and setting very ambitious targets, make very small changes right now, things that we can actually do. And by doing that, we can make the world step by step much better. And just by taking those small steps, I do think we can achieve more than aiming for this very large ideal that we will never be able to actually achieve.
Thank you. Even though I didn't really get to the end of the question, but I think that was more or less the question. Yeah, I do agree that I noticed this chaos around climate change. I did the climate coach training, and at the end of it, it was so intense that at the end of it, I was like, "What is left? What is right? What can I even do to help solve this issue?" And yeah, as a result of that, I kind of started asking myself, well, now it looks like a doomsday, like climate change is going to come and all of humanity will die out. So I did start to ask myself, well, what if we do survive? What are the steps that we can take in order to get there? And I imagined this all in a book that is part of the crowdfunding campaign for Creation. So if you're interested in that, I will invite you to look at the crowdfunding campaign on GoFundMe. I'll add the links somewhere to this video. And you can also look at my podcast where I talk about the startup campaign, and it gives you way more detail that I won't go into now because our time is up. And I want to thank everybody for joining me today. This was very nice conversation. And I think at the end, this issue is of an issue of connection with each other, with our values as humanity, our values in our economic system, and how we treat the environment, how we treat people from other countries, where, for example, we get the resources from. So I think also seeing as this is coming in conversation, this is bringing in conversations is what I want to say. That it's starting to bring that reconnection back. And I think that is the way forward. So thank you.
You know,
Thanks very much.
yes. Bye-bye.